Go slower, it's bruised, the trembling girl moaned as the mountain man's massive hands worked too roughly against her bruised shoulder, prompting his whispered promise, "I'll die before I hurt you." The blacksmith's daughter had always been dismissed by the mining town, her healing touch mocked, her medical knowledge scorned as foolish dreams above her station. Everyone knew her fate. Silent servitude until death, forgotten like all who looked like her. But this gentle giant, this mysterious drifter with calloused hands and surprising tenderness, saw something others missed. He began seeking her out, not for her father's metalwork, but for her forbidden wisdom. Yet beneath their growing alliance lurked a deadly secret. Someone was deliberately poisoning the town's workers to steal their land, and the corrupt doctor's failures were part of the plan. Can two outcasts expose a conspiracy before the next accident silences them forever? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast long shadows across Copper Ridge as Temperance Blackwood swept the entrance to her father's blacksmith shop. The familiar sounds of hammer against anvil rang through the dusty street, but her attention focused on the leather-bound medical journal hidden beneath a stack of old horseshoes. She had memorized every page during stolen moments like these. Mrs. Henderson hurried past with her sickly son Tommy, barely acknowledging Tempe's presence. The boy's persistent cough had worsened over the past week. Tempe knew exactly which herbs could ease his breathing, but offering help would only bring ridicule. Dr. Edmund Hartwell emerged from his office across the street, adjusting his spectacles with the authority his medical degree supposedly granted him. His treatments rarely worked, yet the town trusted his incompetence over her knowledge simply because of who she was. The blacksmith shop door creaked open behind her. Her father Samuel wiped his hands on his leather apron, sweat beading his dark forehead from the morning's work. "More accidents at the copper mine yesterday," he said quietly. 3 men hurt bad." Tempe's jaw tightened. She could help those men recover properly, but Dr. Hartwell would treat them with outdated methods that often made injuries worse. The pattern had become tragically predictable. A massive figure appeared at the end of Main Street leading a tired horse. The stranger stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill doorways. His weathered coat and mountain boots marked him as someone from the wilderness beyond town limits. The mountain man's eyes swept the street with careful observation. Most newcomers looked at Copper Ridge with hope or greed. This one seemed to be searching for something specific. Mayor Cornelius Ashford stepped out of the town hall, his expensive suit immaculate despite the dusty environment. His calculating gaze followed the stranger's movements. Ashford had a talent for spotting opportunity in every situation, usually to his own benefit. The stranger approached the blacksmith shop with measured steps. Up close, Tempe noticed the intelligence in his gray eyes contrasted sharply with his rugged appearance. "Need some work done on my horse's shoes," the mountain man said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Samuel nodded toward his workstation. "Can have them ready by evening." While her father examined the horse's hooves, Tempe noticed the stranger favoring his left shoulder. The way he held himself suggested recent injury, probably from a fall or heavy lifting. The slight discoloration near his collar indicated deep bruising. "That shoulder needs attention," she said quietly. The stranger looked surprised that she had noticed. Most people saw only what they expected to see. "Been bothering me for days," he admitted. Dr. Hartwell would prescribe expensive tonics that did nothing. Tempe knew a simple compress with the right herbs would reduce the swelling significantly. "I could help," she offered, then immediately regretted speaking up. Samuel's hammer paused mid-strike. He knew his daughter's knowledge rivaled any trained physician, but he also understood the consequences of her being too bold. The stranger studied Tempe with genuine interest rather than dismissal. "What would you recommend?" Before she could answer, Mrs. Henderson's voice cut across the street. Her son Tommy had collapsed outside the general store, his coughing fit turning violent. Dr. Hartwell hurried over, his medical bag bouncing as he ran. The crowd that gathered murmured anxiously as the doctor knelt beside the boy. Tempe watched helplessly as Hartwell administered a tonic that would likely make the breathing problems worse. Tommy's lips were turning blue from lack of oxygen. "That medicine will kill him," she whispered. The mountain man's eyes sharpened. "You know better treatment?" She nodded, her hands clenching into fists. Tommy needed immediate relief from the lung inflammation, not the harsh alcoholic mixture Hartwell favored. Mrs. Henderson's desperate pleas grew louder as her son's condition deteriorated. The crowd pressed closer, but no one questioned the doctor's methods. "Why don't you help?" the stranger asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Samuel's hammer had gone completely silent. "They won't listen," Tempe said simply. The mountain man's expression grew thoughtful. He seemed to understand the invisible barriers that kept her knowledge locked away, while incompetence paraded as expertise. Mayor Ashford appeared at the edge of the crowd. His attention focused more on Mrs. Henderson's distress than her son's medical emergency. The Henderson family owned valuable mining claims on the Eastern Ridge. A medical crisis often led to financial desperation, which created opportunities for land acquisition at below-market prices. Tommy's breathing grew more labored. Dr. Hartwell administered another dose of his useless tonic, looking increasingly panicked as his treatment failed. The mountain man stepped closer to Tempe. "If that boy dies because the right help was refused, whose fault is that really?" His words struck like hammer blows. She possessed the knowledge to save Tommy's life, but social conventions demanded her silence while he suffered. Samuel resumed his work, but his movements lacked their usual rhythm. He knew his daughter faced an impossible choice between following society's rules and following her conscience. The crowd around Tommy grew more agitated as his condition worsened. Dr. Hartwell's reputation depended on maintaining authority even when his methods clearly failed. Mayor Ashford whispered something to his deputy, probably already calculating how to approach the Henderson family about selling their land if tragedy struck. Tempe looked at the mountain man, whose steady gaze seemed to offer support she had never received before. He waited for her decision without pressure or judgment. Tommy's labored breathing echoed across the silent street. Time was running out, and she held the key to saving him. Tommy's lips had turned a deeper shade of blue. Dr. Hartwell fumbled through his medical bag with shaking hands, his confidence crumbling as the boy's breathing became more desperate. Tempe stepped forward before fear could stop her. The crowd parted reluctantly as she knelt beside the child, her hands steady despite the weight of every stare. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Henderson gasped. Tempe ignored the question and examined Tommy's throat. The swelling was severe, but treatable. She recognized the symptoms from her medical texts, a condition that required immediate but simple intervention. Dr. Hartwell sputtered protests, but his words carried no authority when his patient was clearly dying under his care. "Move aside," Tempe said quietly. Her voice held a certainty that made even the doctor hesitate. She pressed her ear to Tommy's chest, listening to the labored wheezing that confirmed her diagnosis. The mountain man positioned himself between Tempe and the increasingly agitated crowd. His massive presence created a protective barrier without saying a word. Tempe's hands moved with practiced precision. She tilted Tommy's head back and began gentle pressure techniques she had memorized from advanced medical journals. Her movements were confident, methodical, nothing like the panicked fumbling they had witnessed from the town's official doctor. "She doesn't know what she's doing," someone whispered. But Tommy's breathing began to ease almost immediately. The blue tinge faded from his lips as proper airflow returned to his lungs. Mayor Ashford pushed through the crowd, his face stern with disapproval. "This is highly irregular." Tempe continued working, applying pressure to specific points that would reduce the throat inflammation. Tommy's eyes fluttered open, no longer struggling for each breath. Mrs. Henderson stared in amazement as her son sat up, breathing normally for the first time in days. "How did you know to do that?" Dr. Hartwell demanded, his professional pride wounded by her obvious success. Tempe stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. The crowd's silence was deafening. "I studied," she said simply. The admission sent ripples through the gathered townspeople. Studying implied access to books, to knowledge that supposedly belonged only to trained professionals like Dr. Hartwell. Studied what exactly? Mayor Ashford's tone carried subtle threat. Tempe met his gaze without flinching. Medicine. Tommy clung to his mother's dress, his breathing steady and strong. The evidence of Tempe's success was undeniable, yet the crowd seemed unsure how to respond. The mountain man stepped closer to her side. "Looks like the boy's going to live." His words carried weight that cut through the tension. He spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to making observations that mattered. Dr. Hartwell gathered his medical supplies with jerky movements. This was luck, nothing more, but his protest sounded hollow when contrasted with Tommy's obvious recovery. Mrs. Henderson looked between her healthy son and the young woman who had saved him. Gratitude warred with social expectations across her weathered face. "Thank you," she whispered finally. The simple acknowledgement broke something open in the crowd. Whispered conversations began as people reassessed what they had witnessed. Mayor Ashford's calculating expression suggested he was already planning how to handle this disruption to the established order. A competent healer could interfere with his carefully constructed schemes. "Where exactly did you study medicine?" he asked Tempe. The question was a trap. Any answer would either be dismissed as inadequate or create suspicions about her access to prohibited knowledge. The mountain man intervened before she could respond. "Does it matter where she learned it if it works?" His challenge was direct, practical. Results spoke louder than credentials in the wilderness, and his tone suggested he lived by that principle. Samuel approached from the blacksmith shop, pride and worry competing in his expression. He had raised his daughter to be intelligent and capable, but intelligence in someone like her was often seen as dangerous. "Dr. Hartwell should examine the boy to confirm his recovery," Mayor Ashford suggested smoothly. The implication was clear. Official medical authority needed to reclaim control of the situation. Dr. Hartwell knelt beside Tommy with renewed confidence, as if he could somehow claim credit for the successful treatment. His examination revealed exactly what everyone could see. The boy was completely healthy. "The crisis appears to have passed," he announced. No mention of who had actually provided the cure. Tempe watched this performance with quiet dignity. She had saved Tommy's life, but taking credit publicly would only bring more trouble. The crowd began to disperse, but several people glanced back at her with new awareness. Word would spread quickly through Copper Ridge about what they had witnessed. The mountain man lingered as others left. That was impressive work. His approval meant more than she expected. He had seen her competence without surprise, as if he recognized something in her that others missed. "You mentioned your shoulder earlier," she said. He nodded, rolling the joint carefully. The injury was clearly bothering him more than he admitted. "Come by the shop this evening. I can help with that." Samuel looked uncertain about this arrangement, but he had just watched his daughter save a child's life. Her abilities deserved respect, not hiding. Mayor Ashford observed their conversation from across the street. His attention to their interaction suggested he considered the mountain man's support for Tempe potentially problematic. Dr. Hartwell packed his medical bag with sharp, angry movements. Today's events had exposed his limitations in ways that threatened his position and income. Tommy ran ahead of his mother, his energy fully restored. The dramatic difference in his condition would be discussed in every household by evening. The mountain man mounted his horse, which now sported Samuel's expertly crafted shoes. "I'll be back for that shoulder treatment." His words carried promise. And something else. Partnership, perhaps. An alliance that could change everything for both of them. Tempe nodded, understanding that today had shifted something fundamental in Copper Ridge. Her secret was out, and there would be consequences. The only question was whether those consequences would destroy her or finally set her free. The mountain man returned as promised that evening. Jeremiah Thornfield, though he had only given his first name, settled onto a wooden crate in the blacksmith shop, while Tempe examined his shoulder. The joint was severely bruised, the muscle tissue inflamed from what appeared to be a recent fall. She worked carefully, applying a poultice of herbs that would reduce the swelling and promote healing. "Go slower, it's bruised," she murmured as he tried to move too quickly during her examination. His gray eyes met hers with unexpected tenderness. "I'll die before I hurt you." The words carried more weight than a simple response about medical treatment. Something in his tone suggested a deeper promise, a protection she had never known. Word of Tommy Henderson's miraculous recovery had spread through Copper Ridge like wildfire. By morning, 3 families had quietly approached Tempe for medical advice, despite the obvious social risks. Dr. Hartwell noticed the decrease in his patients immediately. His income depended on the town's medical needs, and competition threatened everything he had built. Mayor Ashford called an emergency town meeting. The agenda focused on maintaining proper medical standards and protecting citizens from unqualified practitioners. The meeting hall filled quickly. Tempe sat in the back with her father, while Jeremiah positioned himself nearby. His presence had become a source of comfort and strength she was learning to rely on. "We cannot allow unlicensed individuals to practice medicine in our community," Mayor Ashford declared from the podium. "The safety of our families depends on proper medical training and certification." Dr. Hartwell nodded vigorously from his front row seat. "Medical knowledge requires years of formal education. Dangerous mistakes could cost lives." The irony was not lost on those who remembered Tommy Henderson's near-death experience under the doctor's care. Mrs. Henderson stood slowly, her voice trembling. "My son would be dead if we had relied only on proper training." Her statement created immediate tension. Other families who had secretly sought Tempe's help shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "One fortunate outcome doesn't qualify someone to treat serious medical conditions," Mayor Ashford countered smoothly. "We must think of the greater good." Jeremiah rose from his seat. His full height commanded attention throughout the hall. What greater good is served by letting people suffer when effective treatment is available? His question cut through the political rhetoric with practical logic. Several townspeople murmured agreement. Mayor Ashford's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. Strangers to our community might not understand our established procedures. The subtle dismissal was meant to undermine Jeremiah's credibility, but his calm confidence suggested he was accustomed to dealing with political maneuvering. "I understand results," Jeremiah replied evenly. "Tommy Henderson is alive because someone with real knowledge helped him." Dr. Hartwell stood abruptly. "Are you questioning my medical expertise?" The challenge hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Jeremiah's expression remained neutral, but his silence spoke volumes. Tempe felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Her brief moment of recognition was transforming into a public trial. "Perhaps we could establish some form of oversight," suggested Mr. Patterson, whose wife had secretly consulted Tempe about her persistent headaches. "Ensure any additional medical assistance meets appropriate standards." Mayor Ashford seized on the suggestion. "Excellent idea. Dr. Hartwell could evaluate and approve any supplementary treatments." The proposal would effectively give Dr. Hartwell veto power over Tempe's medical practice. His wounded pride and threatened income guaranteed he would reject anything she recommended. Samuel stood protectively near his daughter. "Seems like the evaluation should be based on whether treatments actually work." His quiet statement carried the authority of a man who had spent decades earning respect through skilled middling craftsmanship. "Medical effectiveness isn't always immediately apparent," Dr. Hartwell protested. "Some conditions require time to properly assess treatment outcomes." Tommy Henderson chose that moment to run through the meeting hall, chasing a friend in a game of tag. His boundless energy and clear breathing provided stark contrast to the doctor's vague explanations. Jeremiah watched Mayor Ashford's reactions carefully. The man's political instincts were sharp, but something else motivated his opposition to Tempe's medical practice. His concern seemed less about public safety and more about maintaining control. "What if people were free to choose their own medical care?" Jeremiah suggested. Let results speak for themselves. The revolutionary idea sent ripples of conversation through the crowd. Freedom of choice challenged the established hierarchy that kept Dr. Hartwell's income secure and Mayor Ashford's influence intact. Chaos would result, Mayor Ashford declared. Proper order requires proper authority. But several families were already nodding at Jeremiah's suggestion. They had witnessed Tempe's competence firsthand and wanted access to effective treatment. The meeting dissolved into heated discussions between neighbors. Traditional authority was being questioned openly for the first time in Copper Ridge's history. Dr. Hartwell approached Mayor Ashford with urgent whispers. Their conversation was too quiet to overhear, but their expressions suggested they were planning countermeasures. Jeremiah moved closer to Tempe and Samuel. This isn't over. His warning proved accurate. Within days, rumors began circulating about Tempe's medical methods. Whispered stories suggested her treatments involved unnatural practices that violated proper Christian healing. The campaign was subtle but effective. Some families who had initially supported her began expressing doubts about her techniques. Dr. Hartwell started making house calls to families who had consulted Tempe, offering free follow-up examinations and voicing concerns about potential side effects from her treatments. Mayor Ashford contributed by questioning whether unlicensed medical practice might violate territorial laws. He suggested consulting legal authorities about proper enforcement procedures. But Tempe's supporters fought back with the most powerful weapon available: continued success. Every person she helped became living proof of her abilities. Mrs. Patterson's headaches disappeared completely after following Tempe's recommendations. Old Mr. Jenkins's infected wound healed faster than anyone expected. Young Sarah Mills's fever broke within hours of Tempe's treatment. The evidence was undeniable, but the political pressure continued mounting. Jeremiah began his own investigation into the opposition's motives. His questions around town revealed interesting patterns about mining accidents, medical emergencies, and subsequent land sales to Mayor Ashford. Something larger was happening in Copper Ridge. The resistance to Tempe's medical practice might be connected to schemes that went far beyond professional jealousy. The stakes were rising, and battle lines were being drawn throughout the community. Jeremiah's investigation began at the copper mine itself. The morning shift was changing as he approached the foreman, a weathered man named Pete Collins who had worked these mountains for 20 years. "Heard you've had some accidents lately," Jeremiah said casually. Pete's expression darkened. "More than usual. Equipment failures mostly. Cables snapping, support beams giving way when they shouldn't." The pattern was suspicious. Mining equipment was built to withstand enormous stress. Multiple failures suggested either extremely poor maintenance or deliberate sabotage. "Anyone been checking the gear regularly?" "Same as always, but lately it seems like the metal's been weakened somehow." Pete lowered his voice. "Found file marks on a cable last week. Fresh ones." Jeremiah examined the damaged equipment Pete showed him. The metal showed clear signs of tampering. Someone had been systematically weakening critical components to cause accidents. Meanwhile, Tempe faced increasing pressure from official channels. Dr. Hartwell had filed a formal complaint with the Territorial Medical Board, questioning her qualifications and demanding an investigation into her practice. Mayor Ashford supported the complaint with legal documentation suggesting that unlicensed medical practice violated territorial statutes. The paperwork was professionally prepared, indicating significant preparation time. But families continued seeking Tempe's help, despite the official opposition. Her success rate far exceeded Dr. Hartwell's, and word spread through informal networks about her effectiveness. Mrs. Chen brought her elderly mother for treatment of joint pain that had plagued her for months. Dr. Hartwell's expensive tonics had provided no relief, but Tempe's herbal preparations and gentle manipulation techniques restored the old woman's mobility within days. The success stories multiplied, but so did the organized resistance. Jeremiah's evening conversations with Tempe revealed troubling connections between the mining accidents and land ownership changes. Every injured miner seemed to work claims that Mayor Ashford had recently attempted to purchase. The Henderson family was approached about selling their land the day after Tommy got sick, Tempe mentioned during one of their discussions. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. What about the other families you've treated? She thought carefully. The Pattersons, the Jenkins family, the Mills, all of them own mining claims on the Eastern Ridge. The Eastern Ridge contained the richest copper deposits in the entire territory. Control of those claims would generate enormous wealth for whoever owned them. Someone's creating medical emergencies to force land sales, Jeremiah concluded. The scheme was diabolically clever. Injured miners couldn't work their claims effectively. Medical bills from Dr. Hartwell's expensive treatments created financial pressure. Desperate families became willing to sell valuable land at below-market prices. Jeremiah began documenting the pattern with careful precision. His notes revealed systematic targeting of specific families based on their land ownership rather than random accidents. But his investigation attracted unwanted attention. Mayor Ashford's deputy began asking questions about the stranger's business in Copper Ridge and his unusual interest in mining operations. Dr. Hartwell escalated his campaign against Tempe by approaching families directly. He warned them about potential legal consequences for seeking unlicensed medical treatment, suggesting they could face prosecution as accomplices. The threats were effective. Several families who had initially supported Tempe began avoiding her, despite their previous positive experiences with her treatments. Tempe watched her patient base shrink as fear overcame gratitude. The political pressure was achieving its intended effect of isolating her from the community she was trying to help. "They're winning," she told Jeremiah during one particularly discouraging evening. He looked up from the legal documents he had been studying by lamplight. The papers revealed property transfers, medical bills, and mining accident reports that painted a clear picture of organized exploitation. Not yet. They aren't. His confidence puzzled her. The evidence of corruption was overwhelming, but they lacked the authority to act on it. Local law enforcement answered to Mayor Ashford, and territorial officials were too distant to influence immediate events. Jeremiah's background remained mysteriously vague, but his knowledge of legal procedures and business practices suggested education far beyond what a typical mountain man would possess. His questions revealed familiarity with property law, corporate finance, and territorial governance that seemed inconsistent with his rustic appearance. The expensive leather satchel he kept in his hotel room contained documents that he studied privately each night. The papers bore official seals and legal letterhead that suggested connections to wealth and power. His horse's tack, examined closely, showed craftsmanship that cost more than most miners earned in a year. The saddle leather was hand-tooled by masters, the metal fittings were silver rather than iron, and the overall quality indicated significant financial resources. But he maintained his simple facade while gathering evidence and building relationships throughout Copper Ridge. His investigation was methodical, professional, and surprisingly sophisticated for someone who claimed to be just passing through. Tempe noticed these inconsistencies, but respected his privacy. Whatever his true background, his support for her medical practice was genuine and increasingly necessary as official pressure mounted. The situation reached a critical point when Mayor Ashford announced that territorial medical inspectors would arrive within the week to investigate unlicensed medical practice in Copper Ridge. The inspection was clearly designed to shut down Tempe's practice permanently. Dr. Hartwell would provide expert testimony about her lack of formal credentials, while Mayor Ashford would present legal arguments about regulatory compliance. "What happens when the inspectors arrive?" Tempe asked. Jeremiah folded the documents he had been reviewing. His expression was thoughtful, almost calculating. "Depends on what kind of evidence they're presented with." His cryptic response suggested he was planning something significant. The confidence in his voice implied resources and authority that went far beyond what he had previously revealed. The next few days would determine whether Tempe's medical practice survived or whether the corruption in Copper Ridge would triumph through official channels. But Jeremiah's mysterious preparations suggested the final confrontation might not unfold as Mayor Ashford and Dr. Hartwell expected. The territorial inspectors arrived on the morning stage, their official credentials and stern expressions suggesting Tempe's medical practice faced its final judgment. Mayor Ashford greeted them personally, his smile confident as he outlined the complaints against unlicensed medical treatment in Copper Ridge. Dr. Hartwell waited in his office with carefully prepared testimony about proper medical standards and the dangers of allowing unqualified practitioners to treat serious conditions. His documentation appeared thorough and professionally convincing. But Jeremiah had spent the previous night preparing his own presentation. The leather satchel that had remained mysteriously locked throughout his stay now lay open on his hotel room table, revealing documents that would change everything. The inspection began at Dr. Hartwell's office, where the territorial officials reviewed his credentials and examined his treatment records. His formal medical degree from a recognized institution impressed the inspectors, as did his detailed patient files. The concern involves an unlicensed individual attempting to practice medicine without proper training, Mayor Ashford explained. We fear for public safety if such activities continue unchecked. The inspectors nodded gravely. Territorial medical regulations existed specifically to prevent unqualified treatment that could harm citizens. Tempe waited in the blacksmith shop with her father, knowing that her entire future depended on the outcome of this official review. Samuel worked quietly at his forge, but his movements betrayed the anxiety they both felt. Jeremiah appeared at their door carrying a leather portfolio that seemed far too sophisticated for a simple mountain man. His entire demeanor had shifted, revealing authority and confidence that he had previously kept hidden. "Time to end this charade," he said quietly. The walk to the town hall felt like a funeral procession. Word had spread about the inspection, and most of Copper Ridge had gathered to witness the official resolution of their medical controversy. Mayor Ashford called the public hearing to order with obvious satisfaction. The territorial inspectors sat at a table facing the assembled crowd, their official authority lending weight to the proceedings. "We are here to investigate reports of unlicensed medical practice," announced the lead inspector. "Dr. Hartwell has provided testimony about regulatory violations that require immediate attention." Dr. Hartwell rose to present his case. His complaints focused on Tempe's lack of formal medical education and the potential dangers of allowing untrained individuals to treat serious conditions. "The young woman in question has no verifiable medical credentials," he declared. "Her techniques, while occasionally appearing successful, lack scientific foundation and could result in serious harm to future patients." The inspectors listened carefully, taking detailed notes about the regulatory violations and public safety concerns. Mayor Ashford added legal arguments about territorial statutes requiring proper licensing for all medical practitioners. His presentation was polished and seemingly conclusive. Then Jeremiah stood and everything changed. "Before you make any final determinations, I believe you should examine additional evidence." His voice carried an authority that made everyone in the room pay attention. The territorial inspectors looked up from their notes with surprise. "And you are?" the lead inspector asked. Jeremiah opened his leather portfolio and presented official documents bearing impressive seals and letterhead. Jeremiah Thornfield III, representing Thornfield Holdings and several territorial development interests. The name clearly meant something to the inspectors. Their casual attention became focused interest as they examined his credentials. "More importantly," Jeremiah continued, "I'm here to present evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy involving Mayor Ashford and Dr. Hartwell." The accusation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Mayor Ashford's confident smile vanished instantly. "This is highly irregular," Dr. Hartwell protested. Jeremiah ignored the protest, and began presenting documented evidence of the systematic scheme to injure minors and force land sales. His investigation had uncovered financial records, property transfers, and medical reports that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Mayor Ashford has been acquiring valuable mining claims by creating artificial medical emergencies, Jeremiah explained to the stunned inspectors. Dr. Hartwell's incompetent treatment prolonged recoveries, increasing medical expenses and financial pressure on targeted families. The documentation was overwhelming. Bank records showed suspicious payments from Mayor Ashford to individuals who had access to mining equipment. Property records revealed land purchases at below-market prices following medical emergencies. Medical files showed patterns of treatment that seemed designed to worsen rather than improve patient conditions. "These are serious accusations," the lead inspector said grimly. Jeremiah presented the final piece of evidence, testimony from Pete Collins and other miners about deliberate equipment sabotage. Their signed statements detailed specific incidents of tampering with safety equipment. The scheme would have continued indefinitely if not for Miss Blackwood's medical competence, Jeremiah explained. Her successful treatments threatened to expose Dr. Hartwell's deliberate malpractice. Dr. Hartwell's face had gone pale as the inspectors reviewed the evidence. His protests grew weaker as the documentation mounted. Mayor Ashford attempted to discredit the accusations, but Jeremiah's evidence was too comprehensive and well documented to dismiss. "How did you obtain access to these financial records?" Mayor Ashford demanded. Jeremiah's smile was cold. "Thornfield Holdings has been tracking embezzled funds for quite some time. You made a significant error when you stole from my family's business partnership 5 years ago." The revelation stunned everyone present. Jeremiah's true identity explained his resources, his legal knowledge, and his methodical investigation techniques. "I came west following a trail of stolen money and fraudulent land deals," he continued. "Mayor Ashford's activities in Copper Ridge represent a continuation of criminal behavior that began with embezzlement in Philadelphia. The territorial inspectors called for immediate arrest warrants as the evidence of corruption became undeniable." Dr. Hartwell, faced with certain prosecution, broke down and confessed his role in the conspiracy. His admission provided final confirmation of the systematic scheme to exploit mining families through deliberate medical malpractice. The crowd watched in amazement as their corrupt officials were led away in custody. Tempe sat quietly throughout the dramatic revelations, processing the complete transformation of her circumstances and the true identity of the man who had become her closest ally. The territorial inspectors worked swiftly to process the arrests and begin legal proceedings against Mayor Ashford and Dr. Hartwell. Their crimes carried serious penalties under territorial law, including restitution to the families they had defrauded. Jeremiah stood with the lead inspector, reviewing documentation that would ensure proper prosecution. His true identity as heir to Thornfield Holdings carried significant legal weight in territorial affairs. "The embezzled funds can be recovered and returned to victims," the inspector confirmed. "The fraudulent land purchases will be reversed, with full compensation for affected families." Tempe watched the proceedings with quiet amazement. Her world had transformed completely within hours, shifting from persecution to vindication through Jeremiah's revelations. The crowd began to disperse as legal officials took control of the situation. Families who had been pressured to sell their land gathered around the inspectors to document their losses and begin recovery proceedings. Samuel approached his daughter with pride evident in his weathered face. "Looks like your medical practice just became official." The lead inspector had already indicated that Tempe's competence and successful treatment record would result in territorial recognition of her medical abilities. Her practical knowledge and proven results outweighed the formal education requirements that Dr. Hartwell had possessed but misused. Mrs. Henderson approached with Tommy running alongside her. The boy's continued perfect health served as living proof of Tempe's medical expertise. "We owe you everything," Mrs. Henderson said simply. Other families began expressing similar gratitude as they realized how Tempe's treatments had saved them from the systematic exploitation they had unknowingly faced. Jeremiah finished his business with the territorial officials and walked over to where Tempe stood, surrounded by grateful community members. "There's something we need to discuss," he said quietly. They walked together toward the blacksmith shop, leaving behind the chaos of legal proceedings and community revelations. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Copper Ridge as the town began processing its dramatic transformation. "You never told me you were wealthy," Tempe said when they were alone. Jeremiah's expression grew thoughtful. "Would it have changed how you saw me?" She considered the question carefully. Their partnership had developed based on mutual respect and shared values, not social status or financial resources. "No," she answered honestly. His relief was visible. The weeks spent living as a simple mountain man had allowed him to experience genuine relationships without the complications that wealth typically created. "I came west tracking stolen money and fraudulent schemes," he explained. "Finding you was unexpected." The admission carried weight beyond mere words. Their alliance had evolved into something deeper through shared struggles and mutual support. Tempe looked toward the medical supplies she had been forced to hide for so long. Tomorrow, she could practice openly, with official recognition and community support. "What happens now?" she asked. Jeremiah pulled out architectural drawings from his leather portfolio. The detailed plans showed a modern medical facility designed specifically for frontier conditions. "Thornfield Holdings specializes in territorial development," he said. "Building a proper medical center in Copper Ridge would benefit the entire region." The proposed facility included space for patient treatment, medical research, and training other practitioners in advanced techniques. It represented everything Tempe had dreamed of but never dared hope for. "You'd do this for the town? I'd do this for you." His words carried the promise of partnership that extended far beyond professional collaboration. The respect and affection that had grown between them offered possibilities she had never imagined. The sound of hammering resumed from Samuel's forge as normal life began returning to Copper Ridge. But everything had changed fundamentally with the exposure of corruption and the recognition of Tempe's abilities. Pete Collins arrived at the blacksmith shop with news from the copper mine. Equipment's being properly inspected and repaired. No more mysterious accidents. The mining families could now work their claims safely, knowing that their injuries would receive competent medical treatment without hidden agendas or exploitation. Mrs. Patterson appeared with her elderly mother, seeking continued treatment for the joint pain that Tempe had successfully managed. Other patients followed throughout the afternoon, no longer hiding their need for effective medical care. "Looks like you're going to be busy," Jeremiah observed. Tempe smiled as she organized her medical supplies openly for the first time. Each herb, each instrument, each carefully preserved remedy could now serve its intended purpose without secrecy or shame. "Will you stay in Copper Ridge?" she asked. Jeremiah looked at the architectural plans, then at the woman whose competence and courage had impressed him more than any formal credentials ever could. "Thornfield Holdings needs someone to oversee the medical facility construction," he said. "Seems like a long-term project." The implication was clear. His business interests provided reason to remain, but his personal interests provided motivation. Evening approached as Copper Ridge settled into its new reality. Corrupt officials had been removed, stolen property would be returned, and competent medical care was now available to everyone who needed it. Tempe and Jeremiah stood together outside the blacksmith shop, watching the town transform around them. The community that had once dismissed her now recognized her value, while the man she had thought was a simple drifter revealed resources that could support her ambitions. "Tomorrow we start building," Jeremiah said, referring to both the medical facility and their future together. Tempe nodded, her hands steady and sure as they had been when saving Tommy Henderson's life. She had found her place in the world through competence, courage, and the support of someone who valued her for exactly who she was. The sun set over Copper Ridge, ending a day that had changed everything for the better.